everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about The Charge of the Light Brigade by Lord Tennyson. This video is going to take you through 5 key moments from the poem. I hesitate to say 5 key quotes because I may have gone over a tiny bit, but hopefully it will still be all very flashcardable. If you want more information on context and form, there is another video on the playlist for you already, so do check that out. But for now, grab those flashcards and let's get revising.
Okay, so let's look at the beginning of this poem. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Straight away, the poem is beginning in media res, meaning in the midst of the action. There's no context from before. So you get a real sense of the drama and the excitement as these cavalrymen are kind of storming down. A league is a measure of distance. So a league is 3 miles, but obviously it's half a league, so it's 1.5. And you'll notice that what we have is not just repetition of the phrase half a league, again suggesting how close they are to the battle, but it's triadic, as in it's repeated 3 times. So it kind of creates a rhythm, like the sound of them moving forward, which is obviously emphasized through the meter as well. But it's almost like a mantra, you know, to create that kind of sense of enthusiasm. And then I've cut out a few of the lines, okay, and I've just moved on to forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Now notice that we're using exclamatives here and imperatives, but the person speaking is ambiguous. It's simply he said. So that's what we call a dialogue tag when you've got a phrase like he said, she said, he muttered, and they're associated with narrative, you know, with story. But what's important here is the lack of identity. The person who has told them to charge for the guns in this imperative is left unnamed. You just get this third person pronoun. So it's like this kind of nameless authoritative figure that is sending them to their death, and sending them to their death with like this power and enthusiasm. If you look at that imperative, you know, forward the Light Brigade, that makes sense, move forward. But they're being instructed to charge for the guns, not charge with the guns, because they don't have any. Yeah, it's aim for the guns, i.e. to your death. So it really kind of impacts the fact of, or it adds this kind of impact that they're completely and utterly ill-equipped for the task that they have been given, told to do. Okay, this bit is taken from the 2nd stanza and then a little bit from the 3rd stanza. I know I'm playing fast and loose with the whole 5 key quotes bit, but you kind of need to see the way that the poem develops. Now, the there's not to make reply comes immediately after we learn that someone had blundered, i.e. the people in charge had made a mistake, that them going into this ridiculous battle that they're completely ill prepared for was a mistake. Yet, it is theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. So first of all, we've got this anaphora, repetition of the first word at the beginning of a succession of lines, demonstrating or emphasizing that they are the ones that are going to bear the brunt of this, but the ends of each sentence tell us how little power they have. And that's emphasized through the syntactic parallelism. Ooh, scary phrase. That basically means that the structure of the sentences, like the syntax, is repeated rather than the words themselves. So to make reply, to reason why, to do and die. It's also a rhyming triplet, which is quite lovely, helps you remember it. So again, you're getting this kind of rhythm built in, this sort of that reminds us of their ongoing duty. And then we've got this biblical allusion into the valley of death. Now that is also in the 1st stanza as well, and then it is repeated in different ways in the 2nd. But the biblical allusion, it comes from Psalm 23. if you need that. But the Valley of Death was a place that was dark and dangerous. So again, it's reminding us of their impending doom. And then this becomes like a form of refrain. So the phrase that's the repeated, particularly the road, the 600. But again, you're going to see variations of it. And here is one of those variations. So it moves from into the Valley of Death to into the jaws of death. And so notice now how it's become a metaphor, the jaws of death, the mouth of hell. Again, anaphora once more, this preposition into, it demonstrates that these soldiers are being all consumed. They're going right into the belly of the beast, into the jaws of death, the mouth of hell. Notice how the metaphors are slightly zoomorphic, like the Valley of Death is now a monster that is going to eat them. And then again, road the 600, part of that repeated refrain. Now, this little bit that I've put in is actually from the beginning of stanza 3, right? But then it's repeated in the 5th stanza. So you need to look at it in conjunction with which part of the poem we're studying. So in this one, this is when they are going into the Valley of Death, into the jaws of death. Okay, so it's on their way there. Sorry. Okay, so what do we have? Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them. It's another example of syntactic parallelism. The words aren't the same, but the structure is, yeah, because you're still using, I mean, I know these are repeated, but these words here are shifted. And of course, what we have is different prepositional phrases, to the right, to the left, in front, demonstrating that they are completely surrounded. And the anaphoric repetition of cannon is emphasizing the sheer danger and the volume of the weaponry coming at them. Because remember that they are the Light Brigade, yes? So they are just on horses, armed with, you know, swords, like they don't have the ability to fight back against these cannons. And then the description of the cannons themselves is so powerful because we've got these metaphors, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. So notice what we've got is we've got this combination of language to do with combat, but also the weather, and the weather choices here, thundering, storm. So it's about power, it's about destruction, it's also about volume. And what is thundering at them? Well, it's the shot and it's the shell. So again, emphasizing the massive destruction that they're facing in this moment. Now, this little bit I've taken, so I've had to keep explaining where the bits are from because the poem has so much repetition, you know. So this little bit here is actually taken from the end of the 4th stanza and into the 5th stanza. So this is demonstrating the second part of the journey of the battle, because obviously the first half of the poem is describing them marching towards and then being set upon, and this is the bit when they're coming back. Okay, and so notice what we have here. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Okay, so we've got repetition of the not, okay, and you'll notice that it's at the end of the first line and the beginning of the second line. Now, if you want the fancy term, that's called anadiplosis, when you put something at the end of a line and then at the beginning. But what it's doing is emphasizing the absolute depletion of the forces. Sorry, my bits are all out of whack then. It's also worth just looking at the connective then, as in the sort of the obviousness of it all. You know, it's the only thing that they could do. Then they rode back, you know, completely depleted, but not the 600. Now, I'm not really going to say anything about this bit again. I just want to remind you of what we just talked about on the other slide. But here, the function of this repetition of the cannon to the right of them section is to demonstrate that even in their retreat, they are being absolutely slammed by the enemy. And again, at the end of this, we've got all that was left of them, left of 600. And so we've got another form of repetition, okay, just like we had the not. It's almost anadiplosis again because it's close enough to the end of the line. But this word left, which in this case is a passive verb, is again reminding us of that sense of depletion. But because it's in passive, it's a reminder of how little control they had in this moment, that this is what was done to them, not just by the enemy, but by the authority that sent them in there in the first place. Right, final little bit from the last stanza, a notably smaller stanza. It's only 6 lines, and it begins with this rhetorical question: when can their glory fade? Okay, now this fits in with the idea that Tennyson was poet laureate, and so his job was to be, or part of his job was to be very patriotic in his poetry. He sort of needs to reflect that. But at the same time, he did also reflect some of the criticism that was in the papers, particularly that word blunder that I mentioned before. I know there's more to say, but there is a video on context to help you out with that. But this is why the poem ends with such a kind of sense of patriotism, okay, because he needs to celebrate their sacrifice, celebrate them. Part of that is demonstrated through this modal verb, when can their glory fade? As in, like, is it possible that their glory could ever fade? He's kind of suggesting that their glory should be everlasting, that no one should forget it, no one should let it fade away. And then in typically Tennyson style for this poem, we've got more anaphora, and in this case it's an imperative as well as an exclamative, but he's instructing the reader now: honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade. He's telling us what to do, yeah, praise them, see them as the heroes that they are. And that is really emphasized through this semantic field of heroism, because we've got the noun glory, we've got the verb, the imperative verb honour. In this case, it's a verb, not a noun, because it's honour the charge they made. It's an instruction. And then we've got the adjective noble. So all of this is demonstrating their virtues and their bravery. The poem ends with a kind of clear message that these guys were heroes. And that's it from me. Hopefully that was helpful. Give me a shout if you need anything. I'll do my best to return your messages. Do subscribe to the page if you haven't already. Do share this video with friends if they are also revising. And I will see you again for the next one. See you later. Thanks so much.